Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Manbir Kaur, MCC 2022 ICF Professional Coaches Global Board Director.
Thank you, Roger. Hi, everyone. Welcome to day 3 of ICF Global Leaders Forum 2022. It's incredible to be able to connect with all of you, and my pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you again for a wonderful 2 days of GLF 2022 so far. During day 1, we focused on the topic of engagement. During day 2, we explored the topic of education and growth. And today, being day 3, we will focus on innovation and succession. Today, we will have a discussion panel on inclusive leadership, featuring chapter leaders from around the world. Engage in some breakout sessions, some networking, and close with an inspiring keynote on accountability and keeping the promises we make. The pre-work videos, which can be found on the GLF website under the pre-work tab, included 2 panel discussions with our DEIJ task force members, one on understanding the common language of DEIJ and one on creating an inclusive chapter leader mindset. I highly recommend viewing these videos if you have not already done that. They contain great nuggets from the task force, and that can help you move forward the DEIG initiatives in your own chapters, in your own communities. One of the things that stands out from these panel discussion is that we are not limited by the terms themselves. While DEIG stands for diversity, equity, inclusive, and justice, it doesn't mean that we cannot include belonging or other ideas into our chapter initiatives. Another point of discussion was that what may be diverse and inclusive for one chapter may not be same for another community or another chapter. It's really what makes the most sense for each chapter in their individuality. So in July 2022, the ICF Global Board of Directors approved the ICF Statement of Diversity, Inclusion, Belonging, and Justice. Staff and volunteer leaders from ICF's 6 family organizations subsequently co-signed this statement. This statement of principle reflects a position we invite every ICF member, credential holder, and accredited training provider to subscribe to. It includes the statement, and I'm quoting that statement now: we will place diversity, inclusion, belonging, and justice at the forefront of every decision we make within our association. As we continue the journey toward our vision, we will recommit ourselves to valuing the unique talents, insights, and experiences that every coach and clients bring to the world. I unquote. In January 2022, ICF hired our first DEIG director, Lakisha Brooks, and we are excited to provide new DEIG offerings through her work. Thank you, Lakisha, for the work you are doing. Before we move on to our program for the day, we have a few housekeeping notes, and yeah, the slide is up. So these notes are on the slide, but I'm going to read a couple of them. Please use the chat function to share your thoughts during the sessions today. Please be respectful of others and be mindful of the ICF Code of Conduct and our core values of professionalism, collaboration, humanity, and equity. Translation is provided through general sessions using Worldly. For breakout rooms and networking sessions, we recommend using Google Translate. The GLF workbook can be found under the Live Event tab on the GLF website. This workbook is fillable. We recommend the workbook for taking notes and following along with the program. So let's start the day. Let's have fun. Let's learn from each other, and starting the day with our inclusive leadership panel. As a coach, it's essential to understand the privilege, advantages, and access that some have to professional coaching while others do not. Therefore, we need to create an equitable space in professional coaching where everyone can access it when needed. shares Lakisha Brooks, a new DEIG director for ICF. In this panel discussions, we will hear from chapter leaders around the world as they share strategies to raise awareness of DEIG, how to engage inclusive leaders, and identifying the challenges of implementing DEIG in various chapters around the world. So this panel includes Joel Perez, PCC, Davia McMillan, PCC. So the question I will be asking the panelists will be included in the chat. So dear panelists, Joel and Davia, please introduce yourself, your chapter, and your chapter leadership role. So first Joel and then Davia.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Joel Perez, and I am the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the ICF chapter in Los Angeles. I'm also the owner and executive coach at Apoyo Coaching and Consulting. Apoyo stands for support for. I identify as Latinx, Mexican-American, Chicano. My pronouns are he, him, él. And that's a little bit about me. I live in Los Angeles. We have 4 biracial children. My wife and I have been married over 25 years.
Davia, over to you.
Thank you.
Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Davia McMillan, and I'm the president of ICF Australasia, which is a charter chapter that supports 7 branches across both Australia and New Zealand. And we also have members in the Torres Strait Islands. And we currently serve more than 2,100 members, and our leadership team, including the board and the executive team across all 7 branches, is powered by over 100 volunteers. So it's quite a large and an active chapter, and I'm really proud to be a part of it. In my personal life, my personal business, I run a business called Life Design Lab, and I do personal and professional coaching. Yeah, that's me.
Thank you. And we just got to know that our third panelist have also joined. And third panelist is Lina Al-Assaad, PCC. So welcome, Lina. Please come online and introduce yourself.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Hello, Manbir. So my name is Lina Al-Assaad. I am a PCC coach. I am the current president for the ICF UAE chapter, which by itself is quite a melting pot of different chapter that coming from different nationalities. I'm personally half Lebanese, half American, also living in the UAE as an expat. And I've been with ICF for the last 6 years in different roles at the board level.
Thank you. And looking at your diverse backgrounds, and I'm really excited to hold this panel and discuss things with you. So the first question will start with Davia. Davia, if you're okay, so my first question goes to you, that based on your context, how do you raise awareness of the need to address diversity, engagement, inclusion, and justice in a chapter?
Well, as I was saying when I was introducing myself, we actually cover a couple of countries. So, and they are quite different. So we actually begin all of our meetings and our live events in Australia with an acknowledgement to country. And when we're in New Zealand, we do a karakia at our New Zealand events, because it's really important for us to acknowledge and recognise the traditional custodians of the land and the history and the culture of our nations. On our board, we've recently started to explore what reconciliation action plan would look like for us. And here in Australia, which doesn't have a treaty. Australia doesn't have a treaty with its Indigenous population. But we're also interested in how we can pay equal respect to our New Zealand Maori culture and heritage as well. So we're looking at that constantly. How do we pay equal respect and acknowledgement to a history and culture all round? We also run some pro bono programs with organisations that support education and low socioeconomic minorities in our communities. So, for example, we recently started a pro bono coaching program in Queensland with the Queensland Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Foundation. And last year we worked with World Vision. This year we're also partnering with Kaur Cultural Learning, which provides e-learning opportunities about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture. And that supports our members to both work with and in developing opportunities and potential for partnerships in these cultural communities. The other thing that we're really conscious of is our branding and the way that we represent diversity visually within our external facing materials. So what I mean by that is the way that we display diversity in our images, on our webpage and our social media. Because we really realise that when people see themselves represented, they're more likely to engage. So, yeah, that's just some of the ways.
I totally relate to that. When we relate to something, either it's social media or some published material, so we automatically have that connection, and that's so inside us. It may not be expressible, but that's very much inside us. So I'll go to Lina. Lina, how would you add to this particular thing, that how do you raise awareness of the need to DEIJ in the chapter?
Yeah, so just as we said, it's DEIJ is different in different chapters, and to give a context to it, the UAE is home for more than 200 nationalities that actually are together interacting on daily basis with certain values that I would say most important is tolerance and respect. If we look at our chapter at the leadership level, we kind of mirror this diversity in terms of we are 6 leaders from 6 different nationalities, different language, religion, race, ethnicity, culture, what have you, is there. But the work doesn't stop here. It actually starts here. So how can we bring all of these differences and make a common vision and goal to lead in one direction? And the chapter is not only a representation of 6 leaders, it's more than 450 members. So how do we look at the diversity at the membership level and ensure that we're really being inclusive in offering initiatives to all? So for example, for us, language is one of the things, because although the official language is Arabic, it's the least spoken, and sometimes there's a challenge to access certain programs in that language. And for that, we have collaborated with bigger projects to make sure that there is enough material and support for the Arabic speakers, so they are more included. And though the originals of the country, let's say the Emiratis, they're the country nationals. They are also, we want to ensure that they are well represented, because they are now underrepresented, given that there is an overwhelming number of expats. So we try to be more inclusive with these programs. And another way to go and raise awareness of diversity. Diversity is a work in progress. It doesn't stop at, just because we have diverse nationalities. We saw from GLF that we want to look at diversity in terms of age group and go to the younger generation now. So we want to look at programs to go and have these generation access to our chapter and programs.
That's a very interesting perspective, and I'm very curious now, coming to Joel, that Joel, how would you like to add in what these ladies are bringing in from their experience in their chapters?
Yeah, I would say, I think what Lina and Davia shared are important things. I think for us in the Los Angeles chapter and in the US context, we are, of course, recovering from the murder of George Floyd, and which automatically raised awareness for us as a country, although we knew there was always this underlying junk that we have going on in our country around racism, exclusion, and not being inclusive. And as some would say, that event for us, an inflection point, just made everyone aware of what was already happening and brought it to the public's eye. So for our chapter, that of course meant acknowledging racist past in our history, not necessarily for the chapter itself, but just in our country. And so my role as director of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, is new. I forgot to mention earlier that we have about 20 people in our leadership team. So it's a very large group, which I know for some of you, that's pretty shocking. And for us to have a director of DEI, our current president and previous president felt it was important to appoint a person to lead these efforts. And so in conversations, I agreed to step into this role and help really the chapter think about to lay out a plan so that we can become more inclusive, so that we can become a place where all of our coaches experience inclusion. And what that means is we are in the process of, we'll be issuing a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement in the next couple months that acknowledges some of the things that we need to acknowledge, but as well as laying out a plan forward, particularly in 4 areas, and I'll be brief, but looking at things that we can do to really ingrain or do the things that will embed DEI in the culture of our chapter. And I call that vitality and viability. And so what are we doing to link our work to mission, vision, values? The other piece that we're doing is looking at our programming. So training and development, what are some things that we can do to increase awareness and provide opportunities for our members or people who are coach curious to explore things that they should be doing in their own coaching practice related to diversity, equity, inclusion. The other piece is how are we engaging our current members and or recruiting members from historically marginalized communities. And for us, we've defined that as ethnicity, race, gender, as well as the LGBTQ community and those with seen and unseen disabilities within our coaching community. And the last is, what is the climate? Or how are we experiencing our chapter at events, and not only a general by aggregate data, but then disaggregating that data by race, ethnicity, gender, ability, as well as those from the LGBTQ community. And then once we've identified what those experiences are, what are we going to do to decrease the gaps that may exist once we have the data in front of us? So that's how we're doing. That's what we're doing to raise awareness, particularly in our chapter. And I've had conversations with other chapter leaders in the U.S. about doing something similar. And for me, it's all about learning from where we're at and then figuring out ways to improve ourselves. In some ways, using Peter Senge's work of a learning organization. So we are collecting data and seeing where the gaps exist so that we can decrease those gaps, all working towards becoming a more inclusive chapter of ICF, particularly in the Los Angeles area.
Thank you. Thank you, Joel. It's very interesting. And I think all of the audience will agree with me that, all these 3 people, Davia, Lina, Joel, brought out their diversity experience in a very different way. Similarities, and at the same time, there are a lot of different ways you're handling it, and there are different ways you're facing this. So as our panelists are sharing their own experiences, their own insights, I would recommend each of you to reflect on this question and do write it in the chat box. Ask your questions and answer each other. Let's make it engaging. Let's make it a conversation which is beyond this, the 4 people we are discussing here. Although we will have breakout rooms, but at this point of time, when the, what do they call it? Iron is hot. Let's discuss this and let's have more ideas that when we go back, we have more ideas to actually bring it DEIJ in a much more effective way. So moving on, Joel, again, to start with you, my second question is to you that how do you engage with your chapter leaders and members to explore opportunities to make your chapter more diverse and inclusive? Although you already shared a couple of things, but what else do you think, to engage your chapter leaders and members?
Yeah, I think some of the work we're doing is to show our baseline. So looking at these historically marginalized communities, and in the case of what does our leadership look like from a numbers standpoint or demographic standpoint. The programming we offer, what is it in the past 2 years that we've offered? Who are our leaders? Who are our ambassadors? And again, creating, or at least not creating, but showing the baseline of what those numbers are, and then realizing, oh, we've done a really poor job of offering special interest groups or teleclasses to really bring awareness to this issue. And not only just teleclasses specifically about DEIJ, but also how are we asking our potential presenters how they're thinking about integrating DEI into their presentations or their curriculum, not as a way to like point out that they've got some work to do, but then if that's something that a presenter wants to do, like if I want to present and I'm really curious to know how can I think about integrating DEI into something around business development, is there someone I can meet with? And so we're offering that opportunity for potential presenters to meet with someone like myself or folks on the committee that we can work alongside them and think about, okay, you're talking about business development. Well, how are you addressing DEI within that context or within that presentation? And so looking at the baseline and then figuring out, okay, that's our baseline, and here are some aspirational targets we can set to improve not only the types of programming we offer, but the speakers we're inviting, those who are in leadership roles, is going to be really, really important. And so that's how we're thinking about engaging our membership in a way that is welcoming and inclusive, is figuring out, okay, here's where we're at and here's where we want to go. And how do we get to where we want to go based on those dimensions that I talked about earlier, that will hopefully move us in the right direction. And for me, it's all about creating the momentum. So if we create the momentum that we're working towards becoming inclusive and the initiatives we're putting forward, then it makes it much more difficult for someone come in, maybe a future president or whatever, or future leadership to change things, because we're already moving in that direction. And because we're in Los Angeles, right, which is a very ethnically diverse, socioeconomically diverse area that we know we can do better, and we have to do better. Particularly if you look at the data, we know that historically coaching has been reserved for folks who are in executive roles, who have the ability to pay for those services. And so what are we doing to create awareness that maybe we can do better at introducing the concept of coaching to folks who are new professionals, mid-level professionals, people who from historically marginalized communities that have never knew that coaching existed. So what are we doing to educate, partnering with local nonprofits that may be able to make those opportunities available to their own leadership, but then also to the communities that they serve. And so we're looking for ways to do that. And I think that's a way to bring awareness and or provide those opportunities, not only for our chapter, but also for folks who are coach curious and or who want to know more about coaching.
Yeah. Thank you. It seems like you're doing a lot of work, and I love what you said, bringing opportunities and make it available to all kind of communities and people. So I'll go to Davia. Davia, how would you like to add to what Joel is saying? Because you said, yours are multi-countries, right, in a chapter. So how would you do this?
Well, wow, I love everything that Joel just said then. And I don't even know where to start to follow that. That's great, Joel. I guess it really exists in the conversations that we have and that we encourage. And so I guess what we're doing on a practical level is having things like free coach cafes every month, sometimes virtual and face-to-face within the same month. And that's where we invite both our existing leaders and members, but also potential members to come and to network and to share and explore ideas and opportunities with each other. And so that they can actually see the benefits of ICF and contribute to the space as well. And I guess we have about 6 events on average across the chapter every month. And some of them are free and some of them are ticketed events. But the virtual initiatives really make it possible for people to attend everywhere. Australia is a really large country, so it's impossible to get to face-to-face events for everybody. So yeah, we're having a really great time with the virtual space these days, and making it as accessible as we can for everybody. In 2020, we held this virtual summit, which was 40 sessions over 4 weeks, which was a big thing for a chapter to do. And, you know, it was a real tribute to the many volunteers who put it together. But it was a huge success in opening people's eyes and opening the conversation. And we're going to hold another one this year in the second half of the year. It'll be slightly smaller, but the aim is to keep the conversation going. And we provide discount tickets and free tickets to some people for like external stakeholders and partner organisations to encourage them to participate and contribute to the conversation as well. So, yeah. Thanks.
Interesting. Yeah, I think virtual is a big thing, right? You know, that helps really, really in a very deeper way in the DEIJ initiatives. Yeah, I totally agree with that. So, Lina, over to you. How would you like to, add to what Davia and Joel has been saying on this?
Well, it's so interesting to see how much is being done and how much also we are in different chapters. We're working in the same directions without us very much knowing that or collaborating on this. But it's nice to see as an organization how we're having the same direction. So for us, we continue, as Davia has mentioned, we continue to offer opportunities for members to join us. So far, our opportunities have been free of charge since the pandemic. Until now, be it virtual or in person. We try to offer cafes, we try to offer webinars, and we do go to different locations. It's not a big country, but yet there is travel, so that we know we have accessibility for all those who want to attend. We have priority for members to attend, but also are open for non-members. So usually we do seating allocation like 60-40, 80-20, whatever. So we always want to bring in new potential members or new people who are interested in general to coaching. We don't want to limit it only to members, even if it's a coaching cafe. Webinars, we're trying to be diverse also when it comes to speaker selection or thought leaders. We want to look at different diverse options of speakers. At the board level, we have designed coming from different culture and representing different, backgrounds. We've created an alliance whereby we designed how we want to be together and how do we want to hold each other accountable when things do not work. And it's a live document. We keep on checking it and we keep on making sure that we are not having misunderstandings for whatever differences in our vision. And we also try to practice holding that voices that are not heard with us in the room anytime we want to make initiatives. So what may other voices or leave that chair in that meeting room or even virtual meeting room open to what might other voices say regarding this initiative, not only our opinion and what we bring because we've been so long on the board. We're trying to collaborate with other chapters. be it in peer-to-peer coaching or pro bono. And this year we want to stretch our collaboration to the chapters we're not used to work with, because we have some chapters around us in the region. We always tap into each other's, but we want to stretch. And that was a promise we made in the GLF, that we connected with few chapter leaders that are far from our chapter usual collaborative space, if you want, and we want to tap into each other's wisdom to create more opportunities of diversity for our group and members. Yeah, so that's
yeah. So Lina, when you're saying this, I'm curious to ask the third question to start with you. So before I ask the question, I would encourage everyone to engage in the chat box and share your experience, share your comments on what we are discussing here, what these panelists are saying. Ask questions, share your experience, because we all are learning here today about the DEIJ. How do we implement in our own chapters, in our own communities? So Lina, you shared, about how do you engage these chapter leaders and members. So I'm sure when we are on to things, we all face challenges. So what are the biggest challenge to implementing the DEIJ in a chapter or in the coaching world? What's your views on that?
Well, I would say the biggest, but one of the challenges is self-awareness, I would say. Mm-hmm. It all starts by being aware of our own biases first and foremost, and especially as leaders. Now we're discussing this and we go back and we want to make things happen. We want to, make the chapter successful. But how aware are we of our own biases? And it's a continuous work that needs to be done. And soliciting feedback also to learn more about these biases and the gaps. Also a challenge in having rigor with humanity, the balance when it comes to setting strategies and putting goals and holding, all these results and success for the chapter. So there is these rules and governance for each chapter that are very much needed. Then these could be obstacles if, we do not also widen the perspective and look at the lens of inclusivity. So where do we balance and how open do we want to be in our program? Like I said, if everything is free for everyone, why would I have members come in? What's the benefit for them? So it's just balancing this perspective. We also want to, if we want to be more inclusive and tap into underrepresented groups, how much do they have access to coach training is one of the challenge. What's the accessibility to membership is another challenge. Perhaps it's an area that needs to be looked at, and how we can partner on some discounts or on some offerings or some work to really walk the talk and attract these groups into the work that we're doing, and make coaching really an integral part of a thriving society. So democratizing the access to the coach training itself for the different groups, rather than just, just making initiatives to hold the space for all of them. For us, there's language challenges but is particular, and we're solving these. We're making sure that being non-native English speaker does not stop anyone from joining, given that the official communication and language on the board and throughout the membership is English. We're trying to level this. So these kind of challenges are areas that needs to be worked on, if you wish.
Yeah. So I think biases, even self-awareness is something which coaching starts, right? But still, I agree that, we all have biases, whether we are aware or not aware. And you beautifully put it that it's a journey. We can't say now I'm not biased at all, but it's a journey. It's a journey of self-awareness, that how self-aware I am, and then what I'm going to do about it as a leader, as a chapter. So Joel, I come to you for your views on the challenges, what you are facing in your chapter, in your community.
Yeah, I would say very similar to what I don't know if you all are aware, but the Henley Center for Coaching back in 2021 put out a study called Racial Justice, Equity, and Belonging in Coaching. And one of the things that they really identified, which I think our chapter has challenges with, is this notion of color blindness, of we are all the same, let's seek a common ground. When in reality, what we're doing, and whether we're coaching our clients or interacting with each other, is we're not affirming our identities in a way that allows us to be fully present in these conversations. And what I mean by that is I introduced myself as earlier that I identify as Mexican American, right? And that identity plays a huge role in how I approach the world because of how I was raised, growing up in poverty in the, my context in the US, being a first generation college graduate, being someone who identifies strongly with that culture. And if I had a coach who didn't affirm that identity, I feel like I wasn't able to be truly who I am. And I think we do a lot of work with our clients around self-awareness that we talked about. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is this notion for our members that maybe they don't want to engage in this conversation, one, because they're afraid of conflict and confrontation. And they don't know how to engage in this conversation. And that's where the coach preparation schools are really important. And so this study goes on to talk about what coach preparation schools can be doing better in the context of training coaches. And so I know the coaching school that I teach for, this is a huge component in our curriculum, because we want to make sure that we are affirming our clients' identities and that we're able to bring our true selves into the coaching relationship. But it all starts with self-awareness. So I think that is one of the biggest challenges that we face as a chapter, and not only a chapter, I think in the coaching community from a world perspective.
So Davia, what's your perspective?
You're asking me? Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, Davia, I was asking you. So what are your challenges?
My challenges. Well, it's interesting. Joel was talking a bit about himself and his own personal challenges. I hadn't planned on talking about this, but I will. I grew up in a family with my stepfather was a paraplegic. So what that taught me was about the barriers to entry. And it can be as much as the barriers to entry to a building, or the barriers to entry to the workforce, or the barriers to entry to community organisations. So, it's forefront in my mind all the time. And when Lina was talking about biases before, I was thinking I've witnessed that many, many times in my life. And yeah, that just really resonated with me, both of you. Thank you. Australia and New Zealand are both nations that, like many of, I can see here in the list of people who are here that are representing today, we've become the nations we are via immigration. And we now, here in Australia and New Zealand, we support more than 278, I think at the last census, it could be more than that now, different cultural and ethnic groups, plus a lot of subcultures that are really worthy of recognition here. And our biggest challenge is that whilst our leadership team is very diverse in terms of gender identity, physical ability, ethnicity, sexuality, and it's a good representation of our membership, it's not necessarily a good representation or a full representation of our diverse cultural makeup of our national demographics. So the challenge is to find a way to connect and engage and help develop people like our Indigenous coaches or other marginalised groups, and provide them with the opportunities for them to have more impact on our future as an organisation. Yeah.
It's interesting to see that how our experiences, how we we are brought up, everything impacts our biases and everything impacts our lens, the lens we are looking at the world and ourselves, right? So I have around maybe 5 to 7 minutes to wrap up. So my last question is, starts with, again, Joel, to you. What support do you need to move the DEIJ initiatives forward?
Well, yes, that's a good question. I think for us, and I think for others, it's the financial resources to do it. Aside from, I know there's already some Ignite, of course, of the grant being offered there, but I think some more resources around doing helping do a climate study, right? So because that takes time and money, and just support, right, from ICF Global in the resources that we would need to make sure that we are sharing resources as well, right? Because we all can learn from each other. So providing space to share what we're learning in our own chapters, that we can come together, like this opportunity here. But then also, I think granting opportunities to do some more deep dive and ways that we need to think about how we provide or make coaching available to all of our communities, whether within our own context, right, is really important. At least that's my perspective.
Davia, what would you say?
I think it'd be great if we could offer some sort of scholarships or substantially subsidised membership rates for people from marginalised backgrounds, those people who currently have barriers to entry into the profession, such as Indigenous coaches, just so we can encourage them to get a foothold in the profession and be able to contribute to our chapter as well. And it would be great if ICF Global could negotiate some partnerships, possibly with training organisations and other partners to support minority groups, that might be represented in student cohorts as well.
Very interesting. Lina, what support would you need to move these initiatives forward?
Well, definitely what has been mentioned would be great support. So basically breaking down these barriers to access, be it in scholarship, subsidized membership, partnering somehow. There are different ways that we can be, talking and strategizing is one thing, but we need to bring this to life. And another thing is having these kinds of conversations across chapters. Really putting the DEIJ plan on the table and seeing what others are doing. What we're doing here today is very insightful and supportive, and maybe tap into each other's work. What has worked here maybe is a new, because it's having these conversations and be it at a global level for us. Also, it's another challenge bringing this conversation. So going back maybe to question 3 is bringing the DEIJ conversation to the table. So now we're diverse, then what do we do about it? So how do we move from here to really being an inclusive coaching community, really inclusive beyond just wanting to be there. We are so far, we're so large, we're 50,000 and more. So how do we attract these still minorities? We haven't talked about disabilities maybe. I've heard one of the speakers was blind talking about coaching. We don't have access. I don't know, in my area, we don't have access to coach training for like blind or deaf, any other disability. So that would bring in a lot more inclusivity also.
That's a very interesting point. I very, very fascinating point. So thank you guys. And what I'm getting out of it is that we need more discussions. We need more conversations at chapter level, at community level, and across chapters and at global level. So that's what we need to learn from each other. And one thing which really stood for me was being aware of the lens I am wearing. I'm wearing as a leader, I'm wearing as a chapter, I'm wearing as a community, I'm wearing as an organization. and that length, broadening of lens further and further and expanding that vision. So that's what we need. And it's a constant work. It's a constant work, right? It's not one size fits all. And, I think all of you brought flavor of that. And I really loved what you said. DEIJ is also about balancing a lot of things. Of course, inclusivity, but also conserving the culture and value of the community where you are and bringing a diversity which belongs to there. So thank you so much for these insights. Thank you, Joel, Lina, and Davia for your time and the insights you have shared with us all. And I'm sure it has given us all food for thought, something to take back, something to think about, and something to work on. And it seems that you're all doing great work in the EIT space and it's constantly evolving. And I'm sure that the chapter leaders present here are also reflecting on similar things about their own chapters, own journeys. I'm sure they are doing it. And I see some of the discussions in the chat box also. So thank you so much, Lina, Davia, Joel. Thank you. Really is wonderful discussing with all of you. So this seems the perfect time to transition into small group breakout room sessions to continue this discussion. So in the breakout room, we will discuss these two questions. What methods are you or your chapter using to implement DEIJ in your chapter? Draft ideas for DEIJ initiatives, which you can take back to your chapter and start working on it. So these questions can be found in your GLF workbook and will be also shared in the chat box. Make sure to identify a group leader who will be responsible for reporting out key learnings when we return to the main room. Welcome everyone. Welcome back. I hope you had a great discussion in your respective rooms. Let's hear from a few of our breakout group leaders on key learnings from their group discussions. So please welcome Minji O, ICF Professional Coaches Regional Development Manager for Asia. Who will assist me with these report outs? Raise your hand to be called on and please keep it brief. Group leaders, please add key learnings from your group in the chat box too. Thank you. Over to you, Minji.
Thank you. I don't see any raised hands. Just anyone?
I think Harpriya and Madhuri. Yeah.
Sorry, I just... Madhuri, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So we had representation from Malaysia, Philippines, and Pune chapters, and the topic is pretty vast and close to everyone's heart. So we had quite an animated and fun discussion, I should say. So we started with, do people want to be associated with calling themselves a marginalized group? And we've said that we could, and there was a great suggestion by Barry that call it an underrepresented group than a marginalized. And in terms of diversity and purpose, there were some great suggestions that Malaysia is already doing to ensure that there is participation from different groups, that is including them into different communities. There are communities which are not represented where coaching is taken to them, which are some voluntary coaches which are doing it. And also a suggestion about how do we democratize the coaching fees, so that it is more affordable for those in this part of the world where it's kind of tough to pay that kind of high fees for coaching or even coach training. And it also talks about certain types of underrepresented groups who may be out of jobs or may not want to, I would say, want to do coaching, but might not be able to afford it. So we are all a part of this diversity, and ICF Singapore last year had this great speaker, Abamambo, who spoke about belonging. So these were the things, these were the topics we spoke about. If I've missed anything, please type in. Thank you.
Thank you. Haripriya?
Yes, thank you. Well, we had a team from Philippines, Malaysia, Hyderabad, Mumbai, quite a good team. We spoke about the challenges rather Philippines was experiencing in terms of diversity issues, because a smaller zone, they focused on partnering with other chapters, and they focused on reciprocal coaching. That's another takeaway for me, reciprocal coaching. And they're welcoming people interacting from other countries as well. Another challenge that we also discussed was about the barrier, rather, is about coaching fees, the licenses of coach counseling, the coaching training programs. They cannot join the org because not licentiated. Is that right? Did I get that right? Right. And cost is another barrier that we've discussed here, training and again, membership fee as well. So interacting with other other chapters and collaborating with other chapters is one that we spoke about, and especially in South Africa as well. The earlier activity in South Africa, coaches, again, sorry about that. South Africa spoke about the reciprocal coaching. Well, in terms of community practices, we spoke about Karen time zones, challenges with different time zones, and creating own strategies, strengthening the ideas and partnership and peer coaching so that we could involve and include everybody here to set up meets with different time zones. Yes, there's another point that we spoke about was how do we build meaning across regions, training, preparation, and guidance for all the chapter members here. And Mumbai, again, we had a discussion about peer coaching, working, collaborating, because in Mumbai, India, we had different languages. So again, reaching out to multiple people, reaching out to different zones is another area that we happen to discuss. Again, end of the day, we are looking at tying up and partnering with different international chapters, outside zones, outside regions, and see what best can be done for each of us. And the last point that we had about, of course, ICF Hyderabad, we're not just focusing on just diversity when I say it, regional or language, but then here in ICF, we're just 1 year old. We are not just focusing on this, but we are also focusing on how do we allow and create that space for every person to space out and share their thoughts, because we come from diverse backgrounds, diverse expertise. How do we bring it across to the table and let everybody express their thoughts and ideas as well? So pretty much, I hope I captured everything here. Anything that I miss, please add.
Thank you.
Thank you for.
If anyone wanted to share their discussion, please feel free to share it on chat. And over to you, Manbir.
Thank you, Minji. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you, everyone, for those insightful shares. And let's take a short break.